The heat in Baghdad doesn't just press against your skin, it seeps into you, thick, heavy, inescapable. I crouch behind the fractured wall of an abandoned building, breathing slow, heart slower. Dust curls through the still air like ghosts, with nowhere left to go. Somewhere far off, a gunshot cracks like a brittle branch. But none of it reaches me. Not the heat, not the gunfire, not even the familiar weight of the rifle, steady in my hands, because all I can see is him. Brown eyes, wide, confused, a faded blue shirt, way too thin for this merciless sun, and in his hand, a photo, small, crumpled, a family maybe, smiles trapped forever in that fragile square. Fragile like the moment I stole from him when I pulled the trigger that day. I didn't see the photo, didn't even really see the man. Not for real. All I saw was movement, a possibility, a reflex. That's what we're trained for. React first, ask questions later, but later always comes. It follows you, like a long shadow cast by a setting sun, like a whisper that never fully leaves your ear. Weeks have gone by, but he still walks with me on every patrol. With every shallow breath, my name's Staff Sergeant Michael Lane, United States Marine Corps, 1st Battalion, 8th Marines. But out here, names don't mean much. They don't stop bullets. They don't steady the hand that shakes at night. They don't ease the weight that settles slow and permanent in your bones after months of watching everything you once believed in reduced to rubble, to blood, to split-second decisions you can never, ever take back. Out here, in this relentless heat, I've learned that nothing is ever as simple as it seems. The day I shot him, it was supposed to be just another routine sweep. Al-Qarada, a dense, twisted district where streets curl like veins beneath the city's skin. Intel was clear, weapons cache somewhere in that block. Maybe insurgents, maybe not. Didn't matter. Our orders: move fast, hit hard, clear every building, neutralize any threat. We stacked up at the entrance of this battered concrete building, its paint peeling like sunburned flesh. I remember how my heart beat, steady, mechanical, as I gripped the M16 tighter, finger resting just above the trigger guard. The door splintered with one boot strike. Shards flying like shrapnel, and then the world narrowed, contracted, into a tunnel of breath and steel. He stepped into that hallway. No weapon, no combat stance, just a man. Maybe he was coming to check the noise. Maybe he was trying to run. I'll never know, because instinct took over. The loud, irrevocable crack of my rifle filled that narrow space, echoing off the crumbling plaster, before his body even hit the floor. And then silence. But not inside me. No, inside me. There was a scream that never stopped. His hand released the photo as he fell. It spun, once, twice, before landing face up. A woman, dark eyes, a child on her hip, a life I'll never know, snuffed out by my own hand. In less than a heartbeat, I remember the squad moving past me, voices shouting clear, boots pounding through dust and debris. I remember the static in my earpiece, the mechanical confirmation, block secure. I remember filling out the report that night, describing him as an unconfirmed hostile who made a sudden move. But what I remember most is the absence of his breath, the absence he left. Not just in that narrow hall, but in me. They say the first time you kill a man, it changes you. But that's a lie. It's not the first time that does it. It's the one you can't justify to yourself later when you're lying on your cot, staring at the ceiling fan, slicing the air into slow, indifferent rotations, wondering what you missed, what you misread. That's the one that stays. Since then, every night, I've laid awake with the image of his eyes burned into the back of my skull. Not angry, not defiant, just human. Out here, humanity feels like a liability, something you pack away with your civvies before deployment, but sometimes it forces its way back in, like water through a cracked dam. He forced his way back in. Even now, as I walk these streets, my boots grinding over broken concrete, his weight is with me, more real than the men beside me, their voices muffled by layers of my guilt. We pass market stalls, vendors watching us with that familiar mix of fear and hatred. looks I trained myself to stop noticing, but today I can't. Every face could be his, every doorway, the one he stepped out from, every shadow, another photo, another mistake, waiting. "Lane, you good?" Reyes's voice cuts through the haze. I nod, swallow hard, force my feet to keep moving, my eyes to scan for threats, like I was trained to do, but the threat is inside me, and there's no protocol for neutralizing that. Later, back at the fob, weapons cleaned, gear stowed, I sit on my cot and stare at my hands. They don't feel like mine anymore. They feel like tools, tools that act on command, but leave the operator broken. The photo. God, that photo. It's burned into me, more vivid than the sandstorms that choke this city, more persistent than the rattle of axe in the distance. I never picked it up that day. I couldn't. I left it there, with him, as if, by leaving it untouched, I could pretend I wasn't responsible for turning it into an orphaned artifact of a life, interrupted. But I am responsible. No report, no debriefing, no officer's nod will ever change that. Out here, where the lines between right and wrong blur into survival, all that's left is the echo of what you've done, and his echo follows me. Through every alley, every checkpoint, every fragile moment of silence. I've killed before. I've watched men fall. I've seen life drain from their eyes, seen both friends and enemies reduced to blood and bone. But this was different. He wasn't supposed to die, not like that, not like this, and yet here I am, carrying him just as surely as I carry my weapon. The sun sets over Baghdad in streaks of burnt orange and pale grey. The call to prayer rises mournful above the city's broken bones. I sit outside the barracks, smoking a cigarette I don't even want, letting the bitter smoke coat my lungs. Like punishment you can inhale. In the distance, a convoy rumbles by, its headlights cutting paths through the dusk. Another mission, another chance to add more ghosts to the already crowded corners of my mind. But his is the only one I see, and I know, as the first stars emerge over this shattered skyline, that I will never leave this city alone, even if my body makes it back to North Carolina. My mind, my soul, will always be here, crouched behind that crumbling wall, rifle steady, heart fractured, haunted by the man with the photograph, and the shot that never should have been fired. The days that followed all blurred together, patrol after patrol. Same burned-out husks of cars, same crumbling walls, same faces staring through cracked windows or disappearing before we even got close. Every morning I told myself I'd stop seeing him, that time would dull the sharp edges of that memory, that the heat, the missions, the fatigue would wear it down into something less than what it was, but it didn't. If anything, it got heavier. With every street we cleared, every alley we swept, every door we kicked open, it was like killing him had opened something inside me, a hollow space that nothing else could fill. I filed the report, of course, clean, clinical, just another line in the log, unconfirmed hostile, neutralized following escalation of force. But the words meant nothing. Paper is patient. It doesn't record the pause, the hesitation, the fleeting moment of a photograph falling from a dead man's hand, or the breath that never came again. It only records the result, and I was supposed to move on, so I did. Or, at least, I pretended to, until the letter came. It arrived quietly, slipped under the door of our temporary quarters at the base, mixed in with the usual stack of orders, reports, logistics, just a plain envelope, creased at the corners. My name written in careful, deliberate letters. Lane. No rank, no title, just Lane. I opened it slowly, expecting, I don't know, maybe something official, maybe nothing at all. But inside was a folded sheet of paper, and tucked within it, a photograph, the same photograph, or maybe another copy, but it didn't matter. It was her, the woman with dark eyes, the child on her hip, those same smiles, those same lives, now framed not by dust and blood, but by the soft curve of creased paper and quiet, deliberate grief. My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter, the words written in hesitant English, pressed firmly against the margins, like the writer wasn't even sure they should be sent. To the American soldier who was there, my name is Faisal. I am the brother of the man who died in Al-Qarada. I stopped reading. My vision blurred as the words sank into me like teeth. He knew, or at least, he suspected it was me. I forced myself to keep reading. He was my brother. He was not a fighter. He was going to work. He worked at the bakery, 2 streets from there. I know what happens in war. I know you are afraid, just as we are afraid. But I wanted to know, if you knew him, if you saw him, if he said anything, peace for both of us. No anger, no accusation, no demand for justice or revenge, just a question and peace for both of us. I sat there on the edge of my cot, holding the photograph, holding the letter as the evening light faded from gold to nothing. And in that silence, something broke inside me. Not like a gunshot, but like a quiet and irreversible fracture. I was trained to compartmentalize, to lock away feelings the same way we locked up our personal gear before every mission, because emotions get you killed. But this simple letter was more dangerous than any roadside bomb, because it forced me to face what I'd done, not as a soldier, but as a man. The next morning, the squad prepped for another patrol. Same routine, check weapons, gear up, head out. But I moved slower, every step dragged down by the weight of that letter, now folded in the pocket of my blouse, next to the photo, pressed against my chest, like a wound I couldn't stop touching. Reyes nudged me. "Lane, you alive in there?" I nodded, but I wasn't sure if I was. As we rolled through the streets in the Humvee, the city felt different, not just hostile, but personal. Every man we passed, every woman, every child could be someone's brother, someone's son, someone's father, someone like him. The face that haunted me wasn't just his anymore. It was everyone's, and mine too. I thought about writing back right away, but what would I even say? That I'd seen his brother, that I'd killed him, that I was sorry. But sorry doesn't bring the dead back, doesn't mend a heart, doesn't erase the image of a man falling, with a photograph slipping from his hand into the dust and the silence. So I said nothing for days. I carried that letter, a folded weight pressed against my ribs, as I walked through streets littered with spent casings and whispered prayers as I stood at checkpoints, watching the endless, silent procession of a city just trying to survive itself. But something had changed. The moment I opened that envelope, something I couldn't put away again. The letter stayed with me, folded, worn, softened at the edges by sweat and time, until it no longer felt like something foreign, but like a part of me, stitched into the very fabric of my uniform. And my guilt, days blurred into nights, and nights into something less than sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again, not just him, standing there in that dark hallway, but everything that came after, the silence, the stillness, the unbearable fact that he never should have been there, or maybe that I never should have been. I started replaying the scene over and over in my mind, like a film stuck in an endless loop, each time wondering if there was a frame I missed, a second where I could have made a different choice. But there wasn't, or maybe I just couldn't bear to see it. The squad kept moving, same streets, same orders. But me, I started to drift, not physically, but inside, something separating, like 2 tectonic plates pulling apart, leaving only a fault line. Between them, they didn't notice. Not at first. We were all tired, all worn down, all carrying ghosts, some heavier than others, but then the mission tempo picked up. More raids, more sweeps, more chances to make more mistakes. Baghdad became a labyrinth, not of streets, but of memories. Every alley, a place he could have been, every doorway, a portal to another version of that moment, where I didn't shoot, or where I shot again and again, until all I could see was dust and blood. Sometimes, in the quiet, when the squad rested, cleaning weapons, writing home, I'd take out the letter and the photo, unfolding them carefully, as if they might disintegrate under the sheer weight of what they carried. I'd read Faisal's words, peace for both of us, and I'd wonder if something like that was even possible. But me, I didn't believe it was. The streets felt narrower, like the city itself was closing in around me, brick by brick, corridor by corridor, until there was nowhere left to hide. The others still laughed sometimes, over dumb jokes, playing cards, remembering home, but me, I couldn't. Not anymore. Not with him, sitting across from me, invisible to everyone. But me, his brown eyes, never blinking, never forgiving, never leaving. One evening, during a dusk patrol, we moved through a sector I'd never seen before. The air was thick, with that strange electric stillness that always comes right before something breaks. Children played in the distance, their laughter an alien sound. Cutting sharply through the static in my head, we turned a corner, and there, a man stepped out of a doorway, exactly like before. Blue shirt, brown eyes. For a second, my heart stopped. My body froze. My finger hovered near the trigger, as my mind screamed, not again, not this time. But then, he looked at me and smiled, just a nod, and he kept walking, carrying a bag of bread, disappearing into the fading light. Reyes clapped me on the back. "Lane, you good?" But I couldn't answer, because in that moment, I realized how close I was to making the same mistake all over again. It wasn't about that first man anymore. It was about all of them, all the men who could be or might not be a threat. The war turned me into someone who doesn't always know the difference. That night, back at the base, I sat outside under the skeletal frame of what used to be a date palm, and I tried, for the first time, to write back to Faisal, his brother, the man who, despite everything, offered me peace. But the words wouldn't come. Every sentence I started collapsed under the weight of what I wanted, but couldn't say, "I'm sorry." Too small. It was a mistake. Too weak. Your brother didn't deserve it. The only truth. Too painful to admit. So I folded the blank page and left it beside the letter he had sent, like they could keep each other company. In the silence, where my words should have been, the others didn't know what was unraveling inside me. How could they? We were all taught to hold it together, to keep moving, no matter what. But I wasn't together, not anymore. The war took that from me, or maybe I gave it away. The moment I pulled that trigger, and now, every step I took, every breath, felt like walking through a minefield of my own making. Loss isn't always sudden. Sometimes it builds quietly, like clouds thickening on the far edge of the horizon, long before the storm breaks. But that day, the day we lost Santos, it broke all at once. We were running a convoy through Ceuta City, a place that felt more like a maze of whispered dangers than a neighborhood. Narrow streets, barely wide enough for the Humvees. Buildings looming close and watchful, like the walls themselves had eyes. It was hot, hotter than I thought possible. Even for Baghdad, the kind of heat that clings to your skin and makes the inside of your helmet feel like a coffin. Santos sat across from me, laughing about something stupid. I don't even remember what. Just his voice, low and rough, like sandpaper softened by years of use. He always found a way to laugh. That was his gift, making this place for a moment feel less like a war and more like something we might survive. The Humvee rolled over a pothole and the radio cracked with static. And then there was a sound that never leaves you. Once you've heard it, low, dense, an explosion that doesn't just hit, it takes everything. The IED tore through steel and bone as easily as air. The blast threw me sideways, the world spinning, all color, heat, screaming metal, and then darkness. When I came to, the inside of the Humvee was a mess of twisted wreckage, smoke, and something else. Something thicker, something red. I tried to move, but my body felt far away, like I was watching myself from somewhere outside. And then I saw him, Santos, or what was left of him, his eyes still open. staring at something I couldn't see, his dog tag dangling from what was left of his neck, swinging gently, like in some small defiance of the violence that had just happened. I crawled to him, my hands slipping in blood and oil and something else. Something I'll never find a word for. I remember grabbing the tag, closing my hand around it. Like by doing that, I could hold on to some part of him. The others, the medics, the shouting, the chaos. All of it faded into a dull, numb hum. All I could feel was his absence, where he had been just moments before, later, when the smoke cleared, when the wreckage cooled, when his body was taken away. I sat alone on the curb of that nameless, dust-choked street with his dog tag still in my hand, and I realized the only thing I had left of him was that small piece of metal and the sound of his laugh, already starting to fade. That night, back at the base, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I couldn't talk. The others tried, gave me pats on the shoulder, left beers by my cot, but I couldn't join them, not after that. Not with the weight of what we'd lost pressing so hard against my chest that I couldn't breathe, and then, like my hands were moving on their own, I found myself pulling out Faisal's letter, the photograph, and a pen. For the first time since the day I killed his brother, I started to write slowly, deliberately, each word carved from something deeper than language. Your brother. I paused, staring at the ink bleeding softly into the paper. Your brother. I couldn't finish the sentence because what could I even say? That he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, that I made a mistake, that I see his face every night, that the war turned me into someone who pulls the trigger first and asks questions too late. The words choked me, but I kept writing, kept pushing, because after losing Santos, I realized how fragile we all are, how easily a life can be taken before the sentence is even finished. I'm sorry, I wrote it, and without thinking, I'm sorry. 2 words, all I had, all I could give, but even as I wrote them, I knew they'd never be enough. I folded the letter, placed it carefully beside the photograph, and just stood there for a long, long time. Then, without even knowing why, I reached for Santos's dog tag, still hanging around my neck, and pressed it against the folded paper, like somehow, by linking them, by keeping them together, I could make sense of this endless chain of loss, pain, and guilt. But there was no sense to be found, only the quiet realization that I couldn't go back, that from here on, everything would be different, that Santos was gone, and with him, the last intact part of me. In the nights that followed, the base fell silent, not an empty silence, but that heavy silence that only grief can create, a silence that isn't absence, but the presence of everything that's now missing. Santos's cot was still there, untouched, his boots lined up neatly underneath, like he might walk in at any moment and shake his head at how soft we were all becoming, but he wasn't coming back. We all knew that, and still, I couldn't touch his things. None of us could. We just left them as they were, like pretending it wasn't real. But it was. It was as real as the photograph I now kept folded carefully in my front pocket, beside the letter and the dog tag, 3 artifacts pressed against my chest, a trinity of guilt, loss, and the last pieces of who I used to be. For days, I went through my routines mechanically, my body moving, but my mind always somewhere else. Back in that hallway, with the man I shot, back in the Humvee, with Santos, as the light left his eyes, back to those moments I couldn't change, no matter how many times I replayed them, in the dark, before sleep or after, when sleep refused to come. And then, one night, I sat alone at the edge of my cot and realized I couldn't keep living like this, carrying them, but not facing them. I had written the letter, but I hadn't sent it. It was still there, beside Santos's dog tag, folded, sealed, silent, waiting. But for what? For me to find courage, for forgiveness, or for something I didn't even have the words for. And then, without thinking, I stood up, pulled on my boots, and walked through the barracks, out into the open air under the dim, flickering lights, and found myself at the comms station. The sergeant on duty barely looked up as I slid the envelope onto the outgoing mail pile. Just another letter. In a war full of them. He didn't know what it cost me to leave it there. Didn't know. I just sent something more than words. I'd sent a confession, a piece of me. I'd never get back when I walked out into the night. It felt like something had shifted inside me. Not relieved. No, never relieved, but moved slightly from one part of me to another, making space for breath. And the next morning, when the lieutenant asked for volunteers for civilian security patrols, I raised my hand without hesitation, without even knowing why. Maybe because I needed to do something more than just survive, maybe because I needed to stand face to face with the very people I'd spent months hiding from, behind armor and distance and fear. The first patrol was quiet, just walking along the outer edge of the market district, watching but not searching. No rifle, just my sidearm, holstered out of sight, and my eyes, finally, open. I saw what I hadn't allowed myself to see since I got here: mothers carrying groceries, with children trailing behind, their laughter bright and out of place against the world around them, vendors arguing over prices, their voices rising and falling like songs, old men sitting in plastic chairs, watching the street as if it belonged to them and always would. And I realized, for the first time, that Baghdad wasn't just a war zone. It was a city, alive, fragile, resilient, and full of people who woke up every day and chose to keep going despite everything, just like me. And maybe that was the first small step towards something else. Not redemption, not yet, maybe never, but something closer to understanding. As the sun dipped behind the low horizon and the call to prayer echoed through the streets, I stood there alone, watching, listening, feeling. And for the first time since I pulled that trigger, I didn't feel afraid. Not of them, not of myself, just aware of what I'd done and of what I could still become. The days stretched on, and then, one afternoon, as the air hung thick with that familiar scent of dust and diesel, a letter arrived. Folded, creased, simple like mine had been, like all the most important things in this world are always carried in the smallest and most fragile packages. The translator handed it to me, without a word, just a look that lingered a little longer than usual. Before he turned away, I stood there for a long time, just holding it, the thin, soft paper between my fingers, as if it might slip away if I didn't grip it tight enough. And then I opened it, slowly, carefully, like somehow this moment deserved reverence. The words were simple, written in that same careful English, each letter leaning forward, like the writer was reaching out to me across the vast and terrible distance that war creates. Thank you for your letter. I know it is hard to write such things, my brother. The words stopped me, even now, months later. My breath catches on that simple phrase. My brother believed that in war, everyone is a victim, he told me once, that soldiers are also haunted by the things they must do to stay alive. He believed that we must all find peace while we can, I hope. You find it, he would want that. For you, Salam. Peace. One word. But it landed like something more than language. It landed like forgiveness, or at least the possibility of it. I don't remember how long I stood there, letter in hand, reading those words over and over until the ink felt etched into my skin. But I do remember what I did next that evening. As the sun slid low across the jagged horizon, I left my rifle locked in the armory, and I walked out of the base, alone, unarmed, no body armor, no helmet, no mission, no orders, just me and the city that had become my battlefield, my purgatory, my confession. I walked through streets I knew and streets I didn't, past children playing soccer in alleys lined with bullet holes, past vendors sweeping dust from the thresholds of shops that somehow, miraculously, still opened every morning, past old men sitting in silence watching me, with eyes that understood more than I ever could, until I found it the alley, that same narrow place where it all began. The building was still there, its walls still fractured, still pale against the slow decay of time and war. The doorway where he had stepped out was still there, silent, empty, like a wound that never really healed. I stood there for a long, long time, not moving, not breathing, the way a man waits for something to happen and knows it won't. I didn't know what I was waiting for: forgiveness, punishment, maybe just silence, deep enough to hear whatever was left of myself. And in that moment, something shifted, not like the abrupt violence of an IED or the sharp finality of a gunshot, but like a slow, imperceptible turn of the earth beneath my feet. The city kept moving less around me. The call to prayer rose somewhere in the distance, as soft and aching as it always did at that hour, and I realized, standing there, that I could never undo what had been done, but I could choose what to do with what remained. The guilt would always be mine, so would the loss. But now, so was this letter, this answer from a man whose brother I had taken, and who, despite everything, had chosen to offer me peace. And that was something I couldn't walk away from. So I didn't. I stood there until the sun fell completely behind the city's ruins, and the shadows swallowed the alley whole. And then, only then, I turned and walked back toward the base, toward whatever came next, knowing that nothing would ever be the same. The flight home was quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't absence, but wait. The engines hummed steady beneath the wings as the desert faded away beneath clouds that didn't know the shape of war. I sat by the window, watching Baghdad disappear into haze and distance until it was no longer a place, but a memory, blurred by altitude and time. In my chest pocket, the letter still rested, folded next to the photograph and the dog tag, 3 relics of a life I had lived and left somewhere over those streets and alleys and doorways that I could no longer walk through. People say that when you come home, you leave it all behind, but they don't know you don't leave it. It leaves its mark on you, invisible but permanent, like smoke in the seams of your clothes, like dust you keep coughing up long after you stop breathing the air of that place. They called it a deployment. But now I know what it really was. It was a fracture, a break in the line of who I was before and who I am now. And in that space between is him, the man, with the brown eyes and the blue shirt and the photograph crumpled in his hand. He doesn't haunt me as sharply as he did in those first nights, when I couldn't sleep or breathe or forgive myself. Now he lingers, softer, fainter, like a photograph fading on a windowsill, slowly losing its color to the sun, but never its meaning. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I wake and reach for the letter, just to feel the paper beneath my fingertips, to remind myself that it and he are real, that it wasn't just a dream. And sometime when I close my eyes, I hear the sound of his brother's words echoing in the quiet. He believed that soldiers are also haunted, and he was right. We are, not by the dead we couldn't save, or the enemies we faced, but by the ones we never meant to harm, by the ones who should never have been caught in the sights of our fear and our training and our failure to see a man before a target. I've learned that some ghosts don't haunt places, they haunt hearts, and they don't leave when the boots come off, or the plane touches down, or the welcome home sign fades in the rear-view mirror. They stay silent but insistent reminders of what war truly takes and gives, because war gave me this knowing, this ache, this understanding that we are all more fragile than we ever believed, and that sometimes the only thing we can offer in return is the truth of having been there, having seen it, having carried it, and now setting it down, not to forget, but to remember, differently, with grace, instead of guilt, with memory, instead of mourning. As the plane descended and the wheels touched solid ground, I closed my eyes and whispered softly to no one, and to him, and to all of them, "Salam, peace at last," or "as close as I will ever come to it."